Hi, welcome to Just Us Performance Troupe presents Consequence 2020 Pandemic Adaption. This performance is produced by this troupe every year. And every year, it's ambitious because students come from all over the University of North Carolina Wilmington campus to enroll in a course called Storytelling and Culture. There are no prerequisites. And throughout the semester, they learn a research method called autoethnography. This research method maintains that before we go out and we research other people and other cultures, we have to understand who we are, the culture we're in, which we can understand through the stories we choose to tell. They answered a series of prompts over the first half of the semester. They told stories in pursuit of social justice, which we define as a class and a troupe as pursuing a culture where all bodies, no matter how they are categorized or where they are located, are able to reach their utmost potential with safety and inclusion. The show was going to be in a black box studio and in a bookstore downtown called Old Books on Front Street. The students were going to be in one another's monologues. They were going to perform them together in an ensemble production. But COVID-19 interrupted that. We no longer have our studio. We can no longer be in the bookstore. We can't even be together. But the stories were ready. They were written with emotion, with intention. So each student recorded them wherever they were, some on cell phones, some on laptops. Some had to drive to local McDonald's parking lots in order to be able to upload them for you today. And they did, because these stories matter. The bodies that live them want to share them with you. Some of these stories will be reflecting on one's own privileges, one's own biases. By privileges, we mean unearned advantages. By biases, we mean those preconceived understandings we have of others. Others have witnessed injustice, have experienced injustice. They want to share these moments with you in hopes that together we can pursue understanding and we can work to transform the world. Thanks so much for being here. Please, if you have time, could you leave a comment for the cast? We always have a talk back with our audience, and this is the closest we can have this year. Thanks so much.
Every story heard here is an example of autoethnography, which happens to be my favorite qualitative research method. In autoethnography, a person will tell their stories and situate themselves with the problem in society. By adding emotion and humanizing the problems that plague our society, it makes people not only listen, but pay attention. Think about Forrest Gump. Forrest Gump told his story, and without even realizing it, viewers were able to see what life was like through the eyes of a man with a physical disability. Plus, autoethnographies involve talking about yourself, which is kind of my favorite thing.
One, I stopped eating. I worked out every day. I cut my arms and my thighs. Dark red stained the sides of my white shorts that were now too big for me. 2, I tried to escape once. I threw up 20 minutes later. Tried to escape again, and I didn't take enough. My third and final attempt, my love interest found me laying on the bathroom floor and forced every pill out of my system. He told me we couldn't talk anymore. But every time he looked into my eyes, they were still as lifeless as they were when I was laying on the bathroom floor. 3, I was sexually assaulted. I'm no longer comfortable sitting in front of my male professor, and he wonders why I no longer participate. 4. I left. I transferred schools to be on the coast with my cousins. They're supposed to watch me, look closely at my arms and my legs, make sure that I'm eating enough. 5. I'm coping. Xanax, what you use as a happy getaway, is my lifeline. Sertraline for depression, and therapy once a week. All of these events have taken place for me within the last year. Before that, I was happy-go-lucky. Depression and anxiety take over your life, and it's hard to keep fighting, but you do. Because you imagine your mom laying in bed and not getting up for months, your dad wondering why he couldn't help his little girl, and your sister wishing for one last argument. So you push through. Depression and anxiety are from within. It's never as simple as go for a run or get some fresh air. It's meds, therapy, and figuring out how to make it through the day.
Most of us, oh hell, all of us want to fit in. Some do it better than others, and others make different seem cool. Latin, Middle Eastern, Asian, what do all these people have in common? They bring an image to our head. They show us what people might act like, look like, or sound. Now, let's talk about the word Caucasian. Other than a skin tone and a privilege, it really doesn't mean much. Now, you're thinking to yourself, is this white boy really about to complain about being white? Because that's the whitest thing you could possibly ever do. No, I'm going to complain about my complexion because I benefit from it. Shit, I might benefit from it too well. Because at times, when the right moment comes about, I don't bring up that I'm Colombian or Iranian heritage. I don't bring that up. Other times, in the right situations, I will say that I'm Hispanic or Middle Eastern, only knowing the brief encounters that I've had with my ancestors' people. I was working at Salvation Army. It was a weekday at 7 o'clock. And this man and his wife and his 2 kids strolled in. He was wearing a turban and his wife a hijab. And I really didn't notice them at first until my coworker said something. And she said, "That man right there with the big nose and the towel over his head, I don't trust him." She then proceeded to follow him around the store. I said and did very little in response. And I thought to myself, I have a big nose. And even though I don't always acknowledge my background, I'm a human and I need to defend other people that are being judged. So for all the big noses out there, I got your back next time.
I grew up in a good home. I know that I am loved by my parents.
But when it came to dealing with the way that I felt, I knew I couldn't talk to them. I tended to shut down and keep what I was feeling inside in order to protect myself. Whenever I would try to talk to my parents about the way I was feeling, they would say things like, "Just be happy," or "Fake it till you make it." Both of which are great sayings, just a tad bit unrealistic. I pushed my feelings down so much to the point I thought it was normal to feel the way that I did. Due to this unresolved and uncontrolled emotion, I started cutting. For a while, the feelings were manageable, and I was fine. And then I came to college. Once I got to college, I was feeling all of these things in a brand new environment, way outside of my comfort zone. The panic attacks became a weekly event where I would start to feel numb in my fingers going all the way up to my face. It was scary at first, but then I got used to it. As a junior at UNCW, a lot of things started happening at once, and I fell into this state that I had never been in before. I couldn't make myself do anything, and the motivation that I once had faded away. I started to wonder if others would be better off if I was gone. So once again, I fell into cutting. For me, this was a way to escape, something to give my mind a feel, and something else to think of. It took a while for people to notice, but once they did, my friends talked me into counseling, which is one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do. Once I finally made it through those doors to sit down and talk to someone, I felt relieved. The feelings didn't go away, but I started painting as a way to release, instead of grabbing scissors or a razor. Instead of losing myself in my thoughts and my emotions, I am able to lose myself in the creativity of my own mind. And for me, that has been life-changing.
I wouldn't if I were you. I'd be careful with him. Good luck with him. That was all advice that I received that I clearly did not take. I was a 14-year-old freshman in high school dating an 18-year-old senior boy. I don't know if I really expected it to ever work. I don't know what I expected really, but I definitely didn't expect this. A few months into our relationship, I found out that he had another girlfriend. Another girl he was kissing, another girl he was holding, another girl he was hurting just as badly as me. I couldn't understand how a person could hurt another human being so badly and not care. So I got out. She didn't. She decided to stay. Fast forward to my senior year of high school, I received a text message from my friend that read, "Your ex-boyfriend is being arrested outside of my house right now." I didn't ask questions because I really didn't want to know who or why. But later, it became apparent to me through a notification from the police department that read, "Ocean Township man arrested for murder." And I was just so lucky to have gotten out in the timing that I did. Then, a few weeks later, I received another notification on my phone that read, "Ocean Township couple arrested for murder." And I found out it was the two of them. And I am just so grateful that I got out.
Do you ever have those seasons that you go through in your life where you're absolutely, undoubtedly, totally mentally ill, right? I generally resist the "there's two kinds of people in this world" ideas, because I think that just can't be true. If it is true, then we should all just play a gigantic baseball game and whoever wins gets all the toys. However, I do think that there are people who struggle with feeling like they can't keep it together all the time, and then there's people who are lying. And occasionally you have those times, especially if you're me, where something bad happens to you and you retreat into yourself a little too hard accidentally. Sometimes you're living in a house with a couple of other people who develop a stronger fondness for booze and for each other, or even for you. They could be married, it's hard to say. You couldn't tell it by the way they treat each other. Sometimes you're living in a house with a couple of other people, and you think to yourself, I gotta get out of here. But maybe you're too young to get out of there, or you don't have any money, or any means, or anywhere to go. But you cling firmly to the idea that someday you will escape, because you have to. You have to find ways to cope with what you gotta cope with when you're 16 years old and you're not an abuse survivor yet, because, well, you're still in the middle of surviving it. Maybe Batman will show up outside in his car and save you or something. And, other people might laugh at you and say, man, Ryan, Batman's not gonna come save you. And you just think to yourself, listen, man, between me and Batman and you, I think I'll place my bets on Batman. And while you're waiting, it happens very quietly, where, somebody calls you up one day and says, hey man, I've been thinking about going to get breakfast at the Daily Grind. You want to come get breakfast at the Daily Grind? And you just, without even thinking about it, immediately go, no, I don't think so. And this means that you've sort of entered into this other realm. Whereas before you would have immediately said, yeah, Caleb, let's go to the Daily Grind. Why not? And now, no. This is your best friend. He knows you very well. And you could show up to him in whatever condition you were in, and he would understand. But now you're just instinctively saying no to everybody and everything, because you come to this intimate relationship with the room that you live in. And the room has its own needs, and they outweigh yours. And looking back on it, it's funny. But at the time, it's this sort of weird, dark pact that you make. And I always feel like I'm somehow in debt to those dark powers, because while they were awful at the time, they had to be, at some point, complicit in getting me out of there, or else I wouldn't be here today. I consider that environment satanic in the extreme. And when you leave that place, you remember it with fear and with trembling.
On a Sunday in August, I got a message request on Instagram. When I opened it, I read a short story from a woman claiming to be my biological grandmother and her son, my biological father. When I read it the first time, I thought she had the wrong person. When I read it the second time, I realized she knew a lot of things that were true. My parents' names, where they went to school, where they lived. Yet still, the only thing I could respond was, my dad's name is Jeff. My dad was the man mowing the grass outside. My dad was the man who taught me to fish and play softball and came to all of my volleyball games. My dad was the first person that ever called me beautiful. Yet still she persisted with more information. So then I went to my mom's house, my grandmother's, where I showed her the messages. I saw pain and rage cross her face, and then in that moment I realized this woman was telling the truth. My grandmother told me to call my mom. I sent my mom the screenshots first and then called her. She said she would be home soon to explain. When she got home, she took me to a vacant lot behind our local church. I guess it was easier for her to tell me there, away from our family and our home. She told me then that she had followed her high school sweetheart to Florida, a physically abusive man who beat her almost to death and let her lay on the floor. A physically abusive man who then took her to work the next day. A man who, when the police arrived, already had his hands behind his back. My grandparents went to Florida to get my mom and all of her things and brought us home. The home where my mom met the man mowing the grass outside, a 20-year-old man who met a waitress and her daughter and never looked back. My mom explained then that the courts had taken my biological father's rights, and there was a restraining order that they couldn't contact me till I was 18. I wasn't 18 till May of that year. These people who supposedly loved me didn't even know my birthday. My mom explained that they were too afraid to tell me, afraid that I would be mad when I found out, and it was hard to tell someone the truth when the lie had existed longer. I wasn't mad, though. I wasn't mad at either person on either side. See, what I saw was people so filled with love that they did what they thought was best. And what I saw after watching 18 years of fear and pain cross multiple people's faces, I realized that what they needed was that same love. But more importantly, they needed forgiveness.
What does it mean to be white in a body that isn't? To live in a world where the colors in your head don't match the ones on your body. It means tension, because you don't quite belong to your whiteness, and your heritage doesn't quite belong to you. It means, because my mother says that when I was a baby, no one ever thought I was hers. I guess her blue eyes and pale skin just didn't match my dark hair and honey-colored complexion. It means growing up, out of all the Disney princesses, I was always Mulan or Pocahontas. Other brown-haired little girls could be Belle, Snow White, even Cinderella if they wanted, but not me. It means coming home one day in the 8th grade and realizing, oh my god, my parents are a biracial couple. I guess that means I'm biracial. And maybe that's why I can never pass for Belle. It means standing in front of the mirror, looking at your body, and never really knowing if other people see the same thing. It's the worst kind of tension to see yourself living in a body of two colors that haven't quite blended together. It means when someone asks me, where are you from? And I say, well, my father is from the Philippines. I'm putting space between two inseparable things, myself and my genetics, because I'm an imposter. I was not raised in the culture of my body, and claiming my heritage might be overstepping, so I put space there to protect myself. It means the deconstruction of my excuse, I'm Filipino but I was raised white, is really me saying, I know I look this way, but don't let that trick you like it tricks me. I am not who my body tells you I am. And it means when someone tells me that I'm white, I might pause, get uncomfortable, and maybe even a little defensive. But I won't really be able to tell you why. It might be because of the mirror. I'm still standing in front of it, begging it to tell me who I am and how to walk in this beautiful body of multiple colors.
All of these stories are not only autoethnographies, but they're also promoting social justice. Social justice is making sure that everyone has the same opportunities, regardless of their race, their social class, sexuality, their physical appearance, or their socioeconomic status. We hope that after hearing these stories that the Just Us Performance Troupe tells, viewers will be more inclined to stand up for others, acknowledge their own bias and privileges, and learn that no matter their differences, people are people.
Love. Love has been a central point of my existence since it began. As a child, I saw love as something that everyone needed, like water or air or colorful socks. In my mind, good people were loved by everyone. And if you weren't, you were probably some sort of bad guy. Maybe this is why, as a child, I was constantly going out of my way to be loved. Not the romantic or lustful kind of love, no. I was under the impression that everyone met their soulmate at the crisp age of 16, and the only thing I knew that parents did was kiss. No, I wanted platonic love, and I wanted everyone I knew to like me on a basic level. Because if if I didn't have my ragtag group of friends who had my back and I had theirs through any adventure or quest, well, that meant that I didn't deserve to be loved. And that couldn't be true, because I was a good person. And I was willing to prove to people, if I had to, that I was a good person and therefore deserved to be loved. From elementary school to high school, I did everything I could to seem like a model friend. I was there when someone needed a shoulder to lean on or an ear to listen. I made my arms a designated safe space for whoever might need one. I treated people like they were a priority because they were to me. They were my friends and I loved them. Why wouldn't I do all of this and more for someone I cared about? My friends didn't do the same for me. That was okay, because a good friend doesn't tell their friends when they're being a bad one, right? Every day of freshman year of high school, I would go down to the picnic table where my friends and I would eat lunch, put my bag down on a spot, go to the cafeteria to grab my food, only to come back and see that they had moved my things to the ground and all of the seats were now taken. To make things worse, they would always save seats for people who were grabbing lunch in the cafeteria like me, but arriving after me. On the plus side, I am really good at eating while standing up now. The next year, another girl and I realized that we were being left out. The rest of the friend group would hang out after school, drink, smoke, and maybe they just felt that we would be uncomfortable with that. But no matter, we had a plan. We couldn't be excluded from the whole group if we were inviting them to hang out with us. So that's what we did. We invited the rest of the group to hang out with us that Saturday downtown. Saturday came, and they were 20 minutes late because they had decided separately that they were going to meet up beforehand to grab food, and they had lost track of time. But it was okay, we were finally together for 15 minutes. And then they suddenly had the urge to play hide and go seek in the entire downtown area. While the other girl and I were trying to voice how we felt about that, the rest of the group paired us together as the seekers, and then they ran off to go hide. After 30 minutes of trying to find them, we gave up. And 3 hours later, after none of them answered their phones, they strolled back and they were high because they ran off to go smoke in the graveyard. They kept asking me why they were upset. I knew my friends liked me and considered me a friend, but I could tell I was not as important to them as I made them be for me. And maybe I deserved that. It seemed like I was never going to be the person that anyone thought of first, if at all, when it came to someone that they loved. I tried to be a good person, but maybe this was all I was going to get. All the love that I deserved, this was it. I chose to be a resource of love and support for them, but I couldn't expect the same from anyone else because maybe I just wasn't worth it. Fall semester of last year, I end up in a 3-hour conversation with a mere acquaintance at best in a parked car in a random parking lot. We talked about our fears, our dreams, our aspirations and memories, and my desperation to be loved in a way that showed I meant something to someone. At one point, I told him, maybe I'm just too awkward or annoying to have a kind of relationship like that. He, as if it was the most elementary concept, replied, your friends aren't gonna care about the moments where you might be a little annoying or a little awkward, because they're going to love you in your entirety. It was an epiphany for me. Soon after, the budding relationships from the previous semester bloomed into the group of friends I had always dreamed of, including the guy from the car. I am my complete and utter self around them, and they are with me. I know that we have each other's back through any situation. I am constantly surrounded by people who make the decision every day that I am worth it and I am important to them. And when they tell me that they love me, I know they really, truly do.
My first memory is one of my most vivid ones. I was around 5 years old, playing with some well-loved stuffed animals in our cheap Maryland apartment, when I looked up next to me and saw this big white wall. And I was so fascinated with it, but I couldn't put my finger on why, until I took out my paint set and put my fingers on it. And I watched my big white canvas transform into a beautiful splash of colors. I was really excited to show everyone my masterpiece. They were not as excited about it as I was, but that was the first day I remember being aware of my body and that I could use it as a tool to create things, to do things. And this was how I saw my body for years until I was around 13 years old and I realized it existed for other people too. I was at a family dinner. All of us were gathered together. It was one of the rare moments where the extended family had all gathered, and my mom went up to go wash some dishes, and I got up too, offering to help her. And my grandpa looked at me and he said, "It wouldn't hurt you to push away from the table." And so I didn't understand exactly what he meant by that at first, but I got it. And so I did push away from the table for a few days, and eventually I became hungry again. And I was so hungry that I overate, and I felt sick and I began to throw up. And this began a cycle that lasted for a couple more years that eventually culminated one night while I was in the shower. You see, I could hide from myself with, baggy clothing. I could put, scarves over my mirrors and stuff, but the one place that I couldn't hide from myself was in the shower. And I remember looking down at my body and seeing my stomach poking out, and I thought to myself, this cannot be my body. I will not let this be my body. I could feel the gap between my actual self and my ideal self widening and widening and widening. And in a desperate attempt to close that gap, I took a razor and I tried to carve out the body that I wanted. Fortunately, I didn't get very far with that. It was a pretty dull razor. But ultimately, with help and time, I began to view my body as okay again. Nothing, special, nothing great, but it was fine. And this was the relationship I had with my body for a few years until I got a text from one of my best friends. She sent me this picture of herself in costume with a long blonde wig and everything, and I recognized the character that she was being, and so I was a little confused. I asked her, is this your Halloween costume? And she told me, no, it's for a convention. And I was like, what's that? And she's like, I'll take you, come with me. And so I ended up going and I dressed up with her. And I felt a weird mixture of fabulous and bizarre in my costume. It was, I'll admit, very nerve-wracking going out in public in it, not just because of how extra it was, but because I hadn't shown my stomach in public in years, and it was something I was still very self-conscious about. But when we got there, she was right there with me the whole time, but when we got there, I saw all of these other people with these really elaborate costumes, and I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. And they had nothing but positive things to say about my outfit too. And it was so uplifting, and it really helped my self-confidence to, get feedback like that on, my costume, and nobody had anything negative to say about my body or anything like that. It was very, very welcoming. And they were very welcoming to me. And so I, of course, had to do more. I thought, well, this is weird, but I love it. All right. And so I started making more costumes and, seeing what other people had done. And the more I did this, the more I began to see my body not so much as a cage anymore, but my canvas. And I can use it to become whoever I want.
Hollow Week, a week filled with outrageous partying, copious amounts of drugs and alcohol, and a week I had taken way too much advantage of. Tonight, there's going to be a massive block party, and I've been invited to a VIP pregame. I go to class, get back from class, and get ready. And before I'm on my way to the pregame, I decide to pregame by myself by drinking the last 1/4 left of my liquor bottle. I head out and have a friend drive me to the pregame. I get there and continue to drink. From there, we head onto a party bus where everyone is still drinking. Suddenly, we arrive. Little did I know, this is where my life would change forever. I fainted, unable to wake up, my friends trying to do everything they could. Finally, they called an ambulance, where I was taken to the hospital and woke up 7 hours later. I was informed by the nurses that I barely made it, that I was lucky to even be alive. I thought to myself, why would I do this?
Within the past 3 years, I feel like I've aged rapidly. In 2017, I was a senior in high school. I was fit and healthy. Well, at least I thought I was. After feeling like something was wrong and loved ones were saying, you're just overreacting, I decided to go see a doctor. Soon after, I was no longer wearing crop tops to school. Instead, I wore long, baggy ones. My heart monitor's lengthy cords hung down past my hips, and suction cup rashes layered all my chest and sides. I gripped my heart monitor's look-alike BlackBerry phone to signal for help whenever an event began. 200 beats made me hit the button. 200 beats caused by nothing I have done. Supraventricular tachycardia, or SVT they called it. In 2015, I was running for my track team until my ankle began to swell. She's probably just looking for attention. Again, I waited. Fast forward to 2018, when I decided to go to a licensed podiatrist. I got x-rays and was told I did have severe trauma done to my ankle, most likely during my track season time. And now I only have 2 options: bone fusion surgery or steroids. not good choices for a young person. So I decided, let's try steroids. It didn't work. After coming to terms with my heart issues and my ankle issues, I felt like I needed to go check on my allergies. As I left my allergist that day, I was told to be reminded to be very careful when using my EpiPen. I was confused and asked why. She told me that due to my heart medication, if I used my EpiPen, my heart would most likely stop. I just laughed because at this point I felt like every challenge that faced me, I was bound to lose. But then I had to realize a big, important lesson. Everyone's body is deteriorating. Mine just had a few early warning signs. I had and still have to adapt to my new body because it's all I have.
I was about 17 years old walking down the halls of Topsail High School. The smell of Axe body spray and the occasional whiff of weed had been accustomed to my nose. This day was just like any other day, except on this day, I didn't realize I'd meet one of the most amazing people of my life. As I was walking down the halls, I looked to my right and saw a girl giggling with her friends as she looked at me. This girl's name was Emma. She's 14 years old and had been diagnosed with cancer. As I was walking down the halls, Emma came up to me with a piece of paper in her hand, and she said, "Hey Noah, do you want to be part of my club?" And I replied, "Yeah, sure. What's the club?" And then she said, "Honestly, there is no club. I just wanted to see if you want to be friends with me." I was like, "Of course, Emma. Of course I'll be friends with you." After meeting her that day, I did what everybody else does in today's society. I followed her on Instagram. After I followed her on Instagram, I direct messaged her and asked her for her number so that way we could formally text. I figured after seeing her in the halls and she seemed so excited seeing me, that me asking her if she wanted to be friends or hang out sometime would make her happy. After I asked her that, me and Emma practically hung out every day for an entire month. I would take her home every day after school and we would hang out for hours. Hanging out with Emma was always a blast. She was a super funny and inspiring individual. When you were hanging out with Emma, there was no judgment. She really just liked people for who they were. One day when Emma and I were hanging out, she looked at me and she said, "Hey Noah, do you think you could buy me a pack of cigarettes?" And I was like, "Emma, I'm not going to buy you a pack of cigarettes. You're 15 years old and cigarettes are bad for you." And she looked at me dead in the eyes and said, "Noah, I have cancer. What are cigarettes really going to do to me?" After she said that, we both laughed and we got in the car and I got her a pack of cigarettes. Before Emma and I became friends, I subconsciously knew that the worst could happen, but I never really thought that it would. Emma had rhabdomyosarcoma, which is the most common soft tissue cancer among children. For children 15 and under, the 5-year survival rate is slim to none. Emma really changed the way that I looked at the world. For somebody that really had nothing going for them and were given a really bad hand, she always kept a smile on her face and always kept laughing.
March 17, 1999, the day I was born and held by both my parents for the very first time. The amount of joy that was brought to them that day is a feeling they tell me they never forget. 6 months old, my grandma's taken me to the doctor's office for a physical. Recently, my parents and her both started to notice a little hole that was forming on my back and were very concerned. Because of this, doctors told them to rush me to the ER to figure out what was wrong with me. Unfortunately, I found out that I had a tethered spinal cord. Doctors told my parents I'd have several delays in life, be mentally challenged, or possibly even be paralyzed. 1 year old, I was scheduled to have an 8-hour surgery, and my mom is a wreck crying her eyes out because she doesn't know what's going to happen to her baby boy. 8 hours later though, the surgery's complete, and the doctors are astonished to see me already crawling around. 3 to 4 years old. My parents are starting to notice the delays in life that the doctors warned them about. Because of this, they started to notice I had a little bit of a speech impediment, and they decided to get me a speech therapist. Her name was Jennifer, and I've only heard good things about her. I've heard that she helped me out in several different ways and was always very sweet towards me. 5 to 7 years old. I just started school and I absolutely loved it. I loved not only my teachers and my classmates, but I also found out that I had a love for the game of soccer. Because of this, my parents decided to put me into a little rec league with all of my friends, and we had so much fun. 8 to 10 years old. Unfortunately, my parents break the news to me that I'm going to a new school. They tell me that I'm going to meet several new friends and that it's a great school. I remember on my very first day at this school in 3rd grade that everybody already had their group of friends. I tried to go up and talk to people, but unfortunately, nobody wanted to be friends with the new kid. 12 to 14 years old. It's middle school now, and I made the middle school soccer team all 3 years. Because of this, I'm very popular. But I started to notice that school was getting more difficult for me. 15 years old, freshman year of high school. My mom didn't let me play soccer this year because she said the leap from middle school to high school was a big leap. Because of this, though, I did notice that my grades were improving, probably because of the studying tactics that my tutors and teachers taught me. 16 years old, sophomore year. On the soccer field, it was great. I made the JV soccer team, and I was elected captain of the team. I was so proud to wear that armband, not only to represent my team, but also my school. 17 years old, junior year. I decided to try out for the soccer team again, but this year, I made the varsity team. I was so proud of my efforts to finally have the rights to play under the lights. Unfortunately, though, school was getting more difficult for me, and I had to take a break from the soccer team. I remember being alone one day and just being so frustrated and yelling at myself, why am I not normal and why can't I understand anything? 18 years old, senior year. Honestly, probably one of the better years I had in a while. I decided to try out for the soccer team again and made the varsity team and was elected captain. Because of how great I had on the field, I actually got awarded second team all conference and was recruited by a couple schools to play soccer for them. I then graduated high school and went off to college. 19 to 21 years old. It's the present day and we are finally caught up. I am now a junior at UNC Wilmington and I've actually been awarded scholarships for my academic works. So from the beginning of my life to where I am now, I am thankful for a lot of things. But the amount of support that was brought from my family and I is something I'm forever thankful for.
Not too long ago, I was in boot camp for the Marines, which is known to be especially tough. But what many people don't know is how mentally tough it is also. I didn't know, and going in, it really caught me off guard. We had guys break down mentally every day, so we heavily relied on each other to get through it. But during the day, you don't have time, so our only time to catch up with each other was at night. But other than catching up with each other, our biggest form of support were letters from home. Some like me got lots of letters. Letters from my parents, letters from my friends, letters from friends of my parents I didn't really know. When they finally decided to sit us down and pass out letters, it was a huge event because that was literally the only thing we looked forward to. Most of the time, guys got at least one letter. Some guys didn't get a single letter at all. And for the most part, those same guys didn't get a letter the whole 13 weeks we were there. Those guys came from places where they didn't really have a home. They joined because they needed to, not because they thought it was cool or they just wanted to do it. Other guys sent their entire paycheck home because their family couldn't support themselves. For people like me, my paycheck was mine. It was money to spend on fun things. But going through it with them and seeing how little support they had and how much pressure was built on them was really eye-opening. For a lot of us, including myself, those letters got us through a lot. Some of us even from quitting, but they were able to do it with nobody but themselves.
Looking back, I've always been a privileged kid. Growing up in a city like Charlotte, I was lucky enough to have a strong family and good friends that I could always count on. But growing up in Charlotte, it's not like other cities. It's not like growing up in New York or Chicago. It's the biggest city in North Carolina, though. As a high school kid, growing up in Charlotte was hard. Not hard in ways that people struggle financially, even though there is that too, but hard in trying to find yourself. And that's something that me and all my friends struggled with. That mixed with just a rebellious attitude toward any authority figure over us. We were just bad kids with bad attitudes that acted out in ways that normally did us more harm than good. We were the type of kids drinking and smoking in middle school, sneaking out till it was the next morning, or at least till one of us got caught. Definitely throwing some vandalism into the mix too. But one thing that could never really escape us was the deep desire to just grow up. And that haunted me and my friends a lot. You could bet that every weekend, someone's parents would be out of town. Our friends' parents worked a lot. Every kid's parents would be out of town. You could bet on any given weekend that we'd be at one of their houses getting fucked up, drinking, doing drugs, coping with what we now have are just mental issues. This all just came crashing down on us at a very young age because we wanted to be something that we weren't. We wanted to grow up so fast, and in doing that, we were destroying our minds and our bodies. The day I graduated high school, I crashed my car and not only killed myself, but two of my best friends. And I was under the influence of drugs. That moment changed my life tremendously. And if it weren't for the great people around me and the great support group that I have, that's my family, I don't think that I would have made it through that point in my life. And even though I'm still a young man learning many lessons, that lesson that night changed me forever.
I will never forget the day my parents picked me up from a month-long summer camp. On the 4-hour car ride home, they proceeded to tell me that they had moved to a small town called Midland. My world was completely flipped upside down, and to make matters worse, I was changing high schools my junior year. I grew up in Charlotte, which is considered a major city. Everything and everyone was within minutes from me. Growing up in Charlotte also exposed me to a lot of things at an early age, such as drinking and doing drugs. Charlotte had really also molded me into a small-minded snob. When me and my friends first went to visit Midland, we decided to drive around and see just what it had to offer. Midland was a one-stoplight town with one corner food stop. If this doesn't give you the small-town vibe, just know that my neighbors were literally cows. I had many stereotypes about small towns, like everyone was a hick and there's nothing to do. Having this outlook on Midland gave me a bumpy start. For the first few months, I decided to sit in my car instead of making friends and would FaceTime all my old friends in Charlotte. Eventually, I decided to give Midland a chance. I realized that the people were really down to earth and genuine, and they were a lot more focused on making and building relationships with each other rather than going out and partying. My first friend in Midland was Gabby. Gabby was captain of the soccer team, and she encouraged me to try out. In doing so, I ended up making a whole team of new friends. I really liked the close-knit community feeling that this new town brought me. My second friend in Midland showed me that my life wasn't all about partying and brought me to church. Here I met people that were like-minded and helped me grow into a confident person I am today. The person that impacted my life the most in Midland, though, would definitely have to be my boyfriend. He showed me that everything can be an adventure if you look at it with an open mind. And that is exactly what I did with the rest of my time in Midland. I realized that small town people were very inclusive and down to earth, and they were honestly some of the most genuine people I've ever met, and I'm very thankful for living there.
I was trying to be a rapper and no one listened to me. I gave him all directions, I even gave him the key. The page stays refreshing like shade from under a tree. Looking for the views while the people don't even see. Try to understand in the moment I was rejected. It was like getting shot in the heart while I'm protected. All I ever wanted to be was just another MC, to have a couple of hits and be respected. I'm driving down this path too fast, I'm about to wreck it. But I feel like I'd break my knees, bash my toes, bite my gums, bash my nose, just to fucking have one hit that all you know my words, you know my prose, inside my head where no one goes. It's dark in there, won't find no glow. I'm off my shit, I ride my lows, but if you got a talent, go use it before you lose it. A nuisance if you don't use it. You stupid if you don't choose it. Get to it, you need to move it. The clock is ticking top. You stopping making the music because of the shady talk. Hopping off of the chopping block just to block at the option of falling off at the tippy top. You're scared, Mark Jenkins, you're scared of losing it all. Who knew the one decision would make me stoop to a fall? The lack of recognition has been breaking down my confidence. Every choice we make has a consequence. Yep.
The word consequence can sometimes have a really negative connotation. It's mostly used to describe when someone does something wrong, like, there will be negative consequences for your actions. And your actions can definitely produce some negative consequences. So it's just always important to remember to pick your words and choose your actions carefully.
But consequences can also be positive. There's so many good outcomes. Pursuing social justice and bravely sharing your personal experiences can inspire others to even help them gain a new perspective. Every action has a consequence, and it's up to you to make it a positive one.